I'm Latricia Jackson.
And I'm Fynniecko Glover Jr. And today's event is called Brunch and Ballots, sponsored by King County Equity Now. Today's event, we're here to educate our community members on different things that's happening in the city. Right now, we have elections that's coming up for the 2025 year. We want to make sure that everybody is an informed voter. So today, we're bringing this opportunity to hear directly from the candidates on different policies that they want to push forward to make sure that we have a voice and being heard here in Seattle and King County.
We want to thank all of our sponsors and, of course, you, the viewer, for coming. Hope you enjoy.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to introduce our two candidates for City Council District 2. First, we would like to welcome up Eddie Lynn. And after Eddie, we'll like to bring up Adonis Duckworth.
So hi, how are you guys doing on this wonderful Sunday?
Good, thank you.
Yeah? Good.
You might got to speak into it.
Okay. I think maybe it's time to just jump right into it, you know? You guys are running for city council. It's something pretty important, at least to me and the people that live here. Now our first question. Given the wealth gap between Black and white Seattle residents, and as it continues to widen, if elected, what specific economic resources and policies will you implement to create measurable equity for Black families? We need to hear about dollars, programs, and timelines, not just intentions. I can pass it off to you right here first.
Sure. Yeah, it's a big topic.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, Eddie.
Okay, thanks so much. My name is Eddie Lynn. So running for City Council for District 2, which goes from Chinatown International District over to I-90 and then south to Rainier Beach. Currently been working in the City Attorney's Office, working full-time with the Office of Housing, affordable housing throughout the city for the past 6 years. Been living on Beacon Hill since 2007, raised my two sons there. Got a junior at Franklin, one up at UW, married to a public school teacher, son of an immigrant from Taiwan, and yeah, just want to do what I can to support our community during this very contentious and difficult time, especially with the attacks coming from the Fed for immigrants, LGBTQIA, for folks seeking reproductive health care. But you know, even before this time, we clearly have a long history of harm to certain communities, certainly to the Black community, especially in this district, Central District. And there's a lot of corollaries between District 2 and District 3. So thankful to be here. Look forward to the questions.
Yeah, Adonis Duckworth, City Council. I grew up on Beacon Hill, and I live in Rainier Beach now with my wife and two kids. And one of the things that got me into this race was my oldest kid saying she wanted to move, she was scared. Gun violence is a big problem in the South, and South Seattle's good. It's a big problem all over Seattle, particularly as we go central to the South. And the South in District 2, with 13% of the population of Seattle, account for over a third of the gun violence in the city. And so rather than move and go somewhere else, I figured I'd try to step up and do something for my community and try to make a dent in gun violence in the South. I've been working for the city going all the way back to 2010. Started as an intern at Seattle Public Utilities. Outreach engagement is my professional career, so that's what I've been doing pretty much my whole life. Worked with the Seattle Department of Transportation, started in 2016. I was in Mayor Harrell's office from 2023 just up until April of this year, and now I'm running the city council.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you both here. We appreciate you both for taking the initiative, to represent District 2. And we know that it's a very diverse, community. So we'll redirect that to Latricia, and she's gonna ask question 1 again, and we'll get back.
Give this another go. Okay. Yeah. So our first question: the wealth gap between Black and white residents continues to widen. If elected, what specific economic resources and policies will you implement to create a measurable equity for Black families? We need to hear about dollars, programs, and timelines, not simply intentions.
Yeah, thanks. So I think there's three big areas that we need to work on. Housing, public education, and economic opportunities. And so I'll start off just by talking a bit about housing. Well, the other one would be reparations, and I suspect we'll get into that later. But that's sort of at the root of this gap. It's the stolen labor over hundreds of years that we absolutely owe a debt and need to repay. And it shows up in all these different spaces, whether housing and business and in public education. And specifically on housing, you know, things like the Black Legacy Homeowners, Black Homeowner Initiative, supporting efforts to prevent displacement. So yes, putting real dollars, and I think Joy Hollingsworth put $3 million towards the Black Homeowner Initiative for things like repairs, home repairs, for things like aging in place. We need to work with older homeowners to make sure that they are applying for these senior property tax exemption. One thing I'd really love to work on is partnering with the Homeownership Covenant Act, which is meant to provide some mitigation for harms that happened from racially restricted covenants, from the harm that happened from redlining and discrimination, and that provides down payment assistance of $150,000. So we'll continue to talk about that a little bit later. Thank you.
I can, you know, really sort of speak from my own sort of bringing up. It was just me and my mom in the apartment that we grew up in, that we lived in, and sort of what she used to tell me. She would used to say, you know, no matter what you do, the one thing you are going to do is get your education. No matter what you do, but that's the one thing that's really going to help you get from where you are today to where you want to go tomorrow. So a big supporter of public education and education opportunities. So Rainer Scholars is a great program that I'm in support of. We also have the Families Education School Levy, which will be on the ballot, which is on the ballot for this November. So I encourage you folks to vote for that. In 2026, we'll have the opportunity to appropriate money from the levy. So that means, where's that money going to go? How's that money going to be used? And one of the things that I want to see happen is free after-school care in all the Title I schools in South Seattle. That's going to put money back in the pockets of our Black and brown parents. The other thing that I would really like to see happen in 2026, at least start a pilot for this, because King County Workforce Development Council did a pilot for guaranteed basic income. We saw some great gains in terms of healthcare, education. People went out and got jobs when they were just given anywhere from $500 to $1,000 that was put in their pockets, so that they didn't have to worry about their healthcare. They didn't have to worry about the power bill. They didn't have to worry about just basic things, basic needs. They were able to go and do other things that uplifted them to different places.
Thank you. Both of the things that you guys said definitely resonated, you know, with what we're trying to do and how we're trying to definitely invest into our community, especially within District 2. So I'll move on to question 2. The question that we have is, the Central District was once 17% Black, and now it's less than 15% Black. What specific plan do you propose to support Black families returning and retaining their property in the Central District? What mechanisms will you put in place to ensure that we can create Black land ownership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that. I mean, I think we know just over time, we live in any one place over time, we're going to see change, and change is going to happen. And we want to make sure that we're a part of that change, and the change doesn't leave us behind. So there are community development associations, things like African Town, supporting them in the permitting, supporting them in the land use, supporting them in all the different ways the city can support folks like African Town, so that we can build homes, that we can build spaces for people so that they can stay here. But we also know infrastructure is a big part of the change, and we saw this happen. When we did that 23rd project here in the central area. The infrastructure came, and then things looked different. And then when they looked different, a lot of us weren't around for it to be a part of it. Now, during the construction of that project, we were able to, after a hard fight, after people had to fight for it, it was not a part of the plan, it was not a part of the rollout of that project. People had to fight for So while we are going through the change, because change is going to happen, we got to make sure that we are supporting the people that made the neighborhoods what they are today, so that they can continue to stay those neighborhoods. So what the city does have, and I was a part of this, and then it went away. I'm not sure why it went away, but you call it a statement of legislative intent, and that's a fancy way of saying study mitigation. They asked the departments, they asked OD, Office of Economic Development, they asked the Department of Transportation to study mitigation. That study was stopped, but on City Council, I want to bring that study back and see how we can do that.
Thank you, and I'll propose the same question to you.
There's a lot that we need to be doing. So one thing I'm working on for the past 6 years with Office of Housing, there's been a group, Donald King, Nehemiah Initiative, working with Black churches to redevelop properties, to do homeownership or affordable housing on churches in the Central District, and certainly support that work. Want to continue to grow that. I think we need to absolutely do everything we can to support legacy homeowners in the Central District. And so that's things like looking at taxes, property taxes. How do we get tax relief? How do we work with families? So there's a great story from Myron Curry, who was living with his grandpa and had a reverse mortgage and was under threat of losing his home. And thankfully was able to find some financing to build some ADUs on the property and is able to keep that home in the family. And so we have to be creative, start to look at programs like that. I know that Councilmember Hollingsworth was able to convert a legacy home in her family into 3 units of housing. And so we need to make sure that people can tap into the equity into the properties they own. I think we need to do things like legal support for when folks are getting elderly, to make sure that they're not getting taken advantage of. Support Harold's legislation to prevent the predatory practices of the mailers and the phone calls that are constantly happening. But there's a lot. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, okay. Good ideas flying around. Question 3. Seattle's comprehensive plan has failed to stop displacement of Black residents. What specific anti-displacement measures will you champion, and how will you ensure Black businesses benefit from development in historically Black neighborhoods? I'll go ahead and pass this around to you.
I think one of the most important anti-displacement tools that we have to do, so we have to recognize that for many decades, there were many parts of the city that were locked off, that were exclusionary, that had racially restrictive covenants. And then after the restrictive covenants were found illegal, our zoning laws prevented multifamily housing in these areas. And so we continue to be a deeply segregated city. And so we need to make sure that parts of, like, for example, North Seattle, or in my district, parts of like Seward Park, that have not seen development, because we're going to continue to grow. And so there's going to be displacement pressure. We need to build housing. We need to make sure it's in all the parts of the city and not just in District 2 or the Central District, because that exacerbates this displacement pressure. So we need to make sure that kind of the wealthier homeowners are not able to prevent multifamily growth in their areas. A few other things would really love to explore. We need to lean into the equitable development initiative. We need to reduce the barriers. So one thing I've been working on with the Office of Housing is working with newer developers like African Town, like African Community Housing and Development, because we put up a lot of barriers for housing development, and especially for our Black and brown developers. There's things like bonding requirements and financial requirements that are really hard to meet when we've had decades and centuries of discrimination that prevented that wealth accumulation.
And I appreciate this question, and making sure that we have money for the equitable development initiative, make sure that money stays protected, so that money gets back into the community, so folks can open businesses and create spaces. We definitely need to be zoning. In 2026, we will have the opportunity to zone for all housing types. So that's everything from market rate, affordable, low-income, social housing, all the way to transitional housing, ADUs, tiny homes, so that everyone has a place to stay. So no matter what your income level, you are in a position to remain where you are, and working with our CAs, working with our partners. And going back to what I was talking about with making sure that we are supporting the businesses as the city changes. And so one of the things that it's been pretty interesting to me that I'm sort of looking at as somebody who studied urban studies and urban planning, if you look at some of the larger corporations that have come to this area, Microsoft, they decided to set up shop in another city. And so folks, the pressure wasn't so much on Seattle. Amazon set up right in the heart of Seattle. We need to create space. And what happened was that put a lot of pressure on the housing infrastructure, especially as they grew. And we need to make sure that they are paying their fair share back to account for that rapid growth. But what we need to do is we need to put people that look like us in positions to open businesses like Amazon so that we can grow in our city. So you don't have these mega corporations coming here setting up and putting pressure on our neighborhoods. That should come from within. That should come organically, and that comes from just the city supporting folks through EDI, through education and opportunities.
Thank you. Those definitely sound like some concrete, strategies that both of you guys can put forward. So the next question we have is economic Jim Crow conditions persist in Seattle. How will you advance reparations focused policies to address the documented harm that the Black community has experienced? What specific steps will you take beyond just forming any committees? How can we put our faith in you to make sure that we feel heard and address some of the atrocities that happen in our community?
That's deep. It's deep and it's real. Because this goes back. I was just with my mom down south, and I was talking to her about just the integration. Mississippi schools integrated way later than a lot of other places after they wanted the schools to integrate. And it was kind of wild because they just opened the doors. There was no support. There was no nothing. They just opened the doors. Black kids and white kids were going to school. These families that did not. So it was hard on them. And what we saw over time is a lot of this stuff gets passed down, and these things just go from generation to generation to generation. And so here we are in 2025, and it's like, well, what can we do to make it right? What can we do? What are some of the things that we can do to really give back to the folks who helped really build this nation? I do support Harold and what he's trying to do with the reparations, but also thinking about some of the concrete, and it may seem small, but the city does have a pretty robust internship program for kids of color. And I want to get more kids of color into that program and not just put them back out on the street when the internship program is done, but really track where they are going and what they are doing. Because again, this comes back to me. For me, it's all about education. It's all about opportunity. That's how you really get ahead. That's how you really get to the next level. And so the city can turn around and say, hey, we're going to give you this, that, and the other. But we got to make sure that we're giving people real concrete things that are going to make a difference in their lives. Thank you.
So I think there's a few things. One, even though this harm has been documented probably extensively, I think it's always helpful to lay that groundwork. So, for example, with the Black Homeownership Initiative, but the Homeownership Covenant Act, that was based upon documented history of the harms of racial covenants and redlining, and that laid the legal groundwork to be able to develop this program, which now allows for up to $150,000 down payment assistance. It's now forgivable, and that's a meaningful program, which folks are taking advantage of it. Unfortunately, I've met a number of folks who have been able to take advantage of it, but they have to buy homes down in Renton or Walla or Tacoma because they're not able to make it pencil here. And so I'd love to combine city funds with those Homeownership Covenant Act funds. But I'd love to also continue to lay that groundwork in the history. And we should be paying people for documenting this history. Because that's real paper. Blanking on what else I was going to talk about. In terms of, I'll get back.
Cool. Thank you both. Thank you both.
Definitely a lot of the same kind of ideas that we're talking about. Okay. Close it up a little bit. Our youth need real opportunities, what concrete programs will you fund to provide Black youth with a lot of the things that we've been talking about, such as education, enrichment, and economic opportunities that can lead to hopefully some generational wealth. So, more of these concrete ideas.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one thing that's critical in education is that we need to make sure that our youth have educators that look like them, that understand them. So want to continue to support programs like the Academy of Rising Educators, which makes it possible for educators, young educators of color who are not teachers, but are doing other types of like a parent educator, to go back and get a degree to become teachers. I think we need to, with the upcoming Families Education Preschool and Promise Levy, there's money for mental health. I think we need to make sure that that money is funding to make sure that we have mental health counselors that are, reflect the student experience. We absolutely need to support apprenticeship programs. So it's meeting with a local labor union, IBEW, that's doing apprenticeship programs down in Rainier Beach. And unfortunately, a lot of the electricians are out of work, so these younger students or younger graduates are competing. So we need to make sure that there's some dedicated jobs for them to get, so that they can build up that experience and resume, and then later become journey electricians. But there will be funding in that levy, and we want to make sure that that is protected for our Southeast Seattle schools, for our Central District schools, and that funding goes towards things like community violence interruption programs instead of things like school resource officers.
It will probably land flat, but I think this is where I get to tell a joke about concrete ideas for youth, which I would build probably more skate parks. But anyways, but that's real though. Just coming up with more outside the box thinking for our youth, because there's a lot of kids that look like us that don't play sports. They can't play sports. They don't fit in. They don't fit in here. They don't fit in there. And what happens when you don't fit in certain places? You try to find other places to fit in. Right? So typically end up being in the streets. And when you're in the streets like that, somebody says, "Hey man, we're going to be next." You're doing stuff that you shouldn't, because these spaces don't exist for you. So I'm absolutely dead serious about creating these, more or less these third spaces, more skate parks, that kind of thing. Big advocate for the Rainier Beach Skate Park, which I heard is going to break ground this fall, which is great. That gives Black and brown kids something to do in the South that they didn't have before. And so that is something to move people ahead. And when I worked on these construction projects for the Department of Transportation, definitely was involved in the community workforce agreements. I think there's some changes that need to be made there so that we're bringing more Black and brown contractors onto these big city projects. As we know, DOT passed a $155 billion, $1.55 billion. That's a lot of construction work. That's a lot of work for people that look like us. We can get those jobs. But there's a challenge to getting on those jobs and bringing people in to work on those jobs as well. And then again, we come back to education and opportunity where we can create those spaces.
I get more contract. There we go.
Thank you for something concrete.
So with that being said, we want to open up the floor to our audience. Oh, lightning round. My king got some questions for you.
Oh yeah, and for these, I think it's just a yes or no. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to, yes, it's just gonna be yes or no, and we're gonna be given some papers that have yes or that has no. I think we're gonna do we also heard pointers for answer to that.
See if they could know in there.
Yes, thank you. This will be the lightning round.
So just, again, to explain, so we don't have any difficulties, just raise a yes or raise a no.
All right. Question one, do you support disaggregating data for the descendants of American chattel slavery so that we can see how our communities are actually very separated from our immigrant brothers and sisters that have come more recently. All right. Do you support descendant reparations for descendants of chattel slavery that have endured decades of anti-black policies and practices in this state? We support establishment of a $1 billion reparative development fund financed by public and private sector to support affordable housing, business development, workforce training programs as a means of addressing the economic and social impacts of systemic racism and historical crimes. It's going to be a hard choice. Do you support Black community control over resources that are supposed to impact our lives? Just, all right, so that means a lot of resources that are supposed to work on the brochures and we're on the stages with our trauma being used at breakfast fundraisers, but the majority of those resources are not controlled by, national organizations. Do you support significantly increasing opportunity? And this question came from a 16-year-old student at Garfield High School, one of our young leaders, Marcel. Do you support increasing opportunities for young people to earn money? Okay. Significantly increasing. Will you prioritize funding for shovel-ready, community-led affordable housing projects in the community right now, such as the former Cairo site and affordable homeownership projects in the Central District? This is going to be really tough here. Okay, all right. That's what we got for the lightning round, and now you can take it back to our wonderful host and hostess with the mostest.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay, so now I'm gonna open the space to anybody in the audience who would like to ask some questions. And this is for Seattle City Council. Matters a lot to me.
District 2, South End.
District 2 specifically.
Greetings, thank you for coming out today. My question is about density and parking. So you guys have named a number of things that are challenges to be worked on and through, but I have not heard about some of the challenges that parents who have multi-level children have in terms of parking and getting their children to and from school and after school care. So I'm curious about what kind of creativity and partnerships that you can create for spaces that will allow folks to park, one, and two, what is the conversation, what tables are you looking to be at to discuss the density that happens in this area as opposed to Ballard and other areas?
So we were the fastest growing city for a decade. We continue, I think we're going to continue to grow. And so, how do we grow while still, not pushing families out, while still having safe streets and safe ways for people to get around? We have some of the most unsafe streets in District 2 on MLK and Rainier. And we're not going to get rid of cars, and people need to get around. There's certainly, especially families with oftentimes families with young children and our elders. So we need to make sure that our roads accommodate and our rights of way accommodate multiple ways of getting around, whether that's driving, whether it's bus, whether it's light rail or pedestrian or skateboarding. But we do need to build dense, walkable neighborhoods. I think to the extent we can make it convenient for people to use alternative ways of getting around other than cars, that makes it possible for those that need to drive to be able to get around without being completely stuck in traffic. So we need strong public transit that is reliable, that is safe, that is pleasant. We need to build sidewalks so people, again, in District 2, we have some of the least sidewalks across the city. So if people can get around these other ways, it makes it possible for those that need to drive to get around ultimately, there has been some statistics that we've achieved sort of the peak car ownership back in 2017, even though we continue to grow our population. We now have 20% of households that don't have a vehicle. And so I think that we need to continue to grow those numbers again, so that people need to drive and get around that way.
Yeah, and I appreciate this question. I was really fortunate to get to, I went to London a couple of summers ago as part of this Urban 95 Academy. It's a London School of Economics. Studied for a week with other city administrators from all over the world. There was 10 others. It was very fascinating. But we studied sort of their council housing, state-built housing, and in these different areas that people lived in that really had all the services all within a few blocks of each other, which was pretty wild. And to come back and say, in the long term, that would be my vision for Seattle. So that if you're in the central area or if you're in Rainier Beach, you don't have to go, you can walk 5 to 10 minutes to everything you need, from medication to your groceries to your kids' school to everything. That's the long-term vision. Because it's possible, and I know it's possible. I know it's possible in other parts of the world, and we are headed to a place now. I mean, it's beautiful out today. Who doesn't love it here? So you're going to have a lot of people moving here over time. So we need to start planning for that now. But in the current state that we are in, and stay with me on this, the more people that we can get on transit makes it easier for those folks who can drive. So the more people who are able to take other means of transportation, for those people where it's essential that they drive, like my mom, when she comes here, she's not going to take the bus. She can't. She has to drive. But what we need is we need to get people in a mindset to be able to use other forms of transportation, because that will open up those spaces. And in order to do that, we would have to make sure that we have the actual transit, that we actually have safe biking infrastructure, that we have safe sidewalks, because we're not going to get more people to do those things unless we build for them.
Hopefully you're later, I'm just asking.
45 seconds.
The question is in conjunction with what you just shared about transportation for District 2, considering safety, right? Transportation, we know that is our Black teenage, 16 to early 20s, who are most violated, targeted on public transportation, right? So we're going to create some of that, these line bikes and all that. I just got a bill for $110 for my son going to and from school. He's trying to go to school and he's trying to get to the skills center, doing those different things, whatever, just for travel. So I don't mind the bike lanes and all of that, but the reality for transportation, I need y'all to really consider what's systemic, because it's so bad in District 2 because of decisions that was already made by the council. It's not bad because people are bad in District 2. So I need that to be considered, because when we say who needs to take transit, the average Black mother don't want her son on the bus. I've had real things come to my son just trying to get in Columbia City. So I would like for y'all to consider that when you're considering, wherever they're just considering about how we're going to make it look more pretty. What does safety really look like? And I ain't talking about young teenagers in Dunlap. I'm talking about people who are the people getting paid for public safety, or who are driving the bus, or targeting our kids, making them feel they don't want them. Thank you.
Is that
15 seconds.
okay? 15 seconds. All right. So growing up, I always knew number 7, but you didn't take the number 7. So, y'all remember that. And it's a constant struggle in my house. I have a young Black girl who's 15, and I keep telling my wife she can get on the bus, and my wife keeps saying no, she can't. And it's because of the safety. It's a safety thing. So it's a struggle in households, and I get it. I definitely understand that. And I could give you all the talking points. We have our Seattle transit measure. We can build more lighting, this, that, and the other. But it doesn't take away that fear parents have for their children getting on the bus. That should be safe. So we need to make sure that we have all the things in place, between the infrastructure, between the security, and then really, really working with King County Metro to make sure that they're doing their part to keep people safe on the bus too.
I also feel like you guys spoke to family that has 2 children. I'm thinking, there's large families here, like 5 and 8 families that so far you guys didn't speak to that.
I'll just say that I think that thank you, Mike, public safety, for example, can mean many different things for different folks, right? And sometimes, some people might be excited to see some security on the bus, whereas others might be terrified to see security on the bus. And so I think we need to center the needs of the folks that have been discriminated and harmed for too long, and put their priority, their safety and needs first, and then let that lead us as we figure out how to encourage transportation, how to meet the needs of larger families that need to be driving. So, thank you.
All right, we thank you. Oh, you're right. Okay.
Well, please give a warm welcome to Eddie and Adonis. Will be representing us in District 2. So thank you guys for your time and coming down and joining us on this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much.